Hello, my lovelies. Welcome back to the Geek Suite. I'm your host, the one and only Kidner Bean, and today's video is a poll selection, and we're going to be talking about another cartoon conspiracy as I cover Disney's Kim Possible.
Oh yeah, yeah. Call me, beep me if you wanna reach me.
And if you want to reach me, be sure to hit like and subscribe and ring that notification bell so you'll always be up to date on all of our delicious Geek Suite content. Be sure to follow me on Twitter at KidnerBean and Instagram. Names will be here. And if you're looking to spend a little extra money and panic buy during COVID-19 and quarantine, be sure to check out our Patreon page. Patrons are who make this channel possible. Each donation, by video or by month, helps support more content like this, and our patrons get extra features such as exclusive patron-only access, early access to videos, double votes in our polls like the one that chose today's video, and at the higher levels you get access to the Geek Suite Discord server. For more information on that, be sure to check out our Patreon page. I have a little link here and a clickable version in the description section down below. Okay, so high-key Kim Possible was one of my favorite characters as a kid because I was someone who really identified with girls who like to be cute and kick butt, so people like Kim Possible, Mulan, and Esmeralda were really big figures for me growing up as a kid. So naturally, during our shelter-in-place order here in Los Angeles, I've been binge watching Kim Possible, rewatching the series on Disney Plus while at home doing nothing. Well, I'm not doing nothing, but when I could be doing nothing, I'm watching TV. And the more I started watching the show, the more I started thinking about it, as I'm wont to do, and I came to the realization about Kim's life after high school, and that is that she probably didn't go to college, or at least not to an elite four-year university like you would probably expect her to, considering who her family is. So when I was in graduate school, I worked with several student organizations that paired with our university's registrar's office and the Office of Admissions, which was in Aunt Beck University. And as we also partnered with local high schools and community colleges to help their students cater their applications legally so that they would stand out when they submitted these applications to a school of their choice, not necessarily just ours. So knowing what these schools look at when they're looking at college admissions applications, I can then apply these criteria as we go through the video and see what would stand out as good for Kim and the reasons why I think she probably wouldn't get in, barring an Aunt Becky situation, to one of these elite schools. Now, the first one is obvious and something that everyone kind of thinks about, and that's going to be GPA, grade point average. Now, Kim comes from a family of geniuses. Her dad's a rocket scientist, her mom's a brain surgeon, and her little brothers are genius inventors, not unlike the Weasley twins. But Kim herself doesn't meet that genius level of intelligence. She's by no means stupid. She's very smart. She does good in school and graduates high school at the end of the series. But she's not one of these inventor, genius IQ types. She's above average, but she's not stellar. She's sort of the Donnie Stevens of her family, to make a reference to another Disney show with Christy Carlson Romano. Now, we see that when she's contrasted to her sidekick, Ron Stoppable, she seems very smart. But when she's compared to maybe other members of her family, like she doesn't make her own inventions, she has Wade do it. She often has issues balancing her life, studying for tests versus saving the world. And her parents, being in a family of geniuses, sort of operate under this laissez-faire, you'll figure it out, nothing's impossible for a possible sort of thing, and just kind of leave her to her own devices, which is probably where they messed up with Kim. Because we see that Kim, like I said, she's not stupid, she's average to above average, and she would kind of need to be because she's already this super-powered character where she doesn't have superpowers, but she's an elite crime fighter, she's got all the Batman gadgets, she's a cheerleader, but she also has to be relatable to everyday girls like me at home on the Disney Channel who would maybe want to aspire to something like that, but know that there's that super level element that comes with being a Disney character. So Kim's GPA we would expect to be average but not stand out. it wouldn't put her on the top of anyone's list because of her GPA alone, which is something that universities look at. They don't really care what your GPA is unless it's really, really high or really, really low. So, for anyone who's watching who's applying to universities in the next year, that's something to think about. Don't worry if your GPA isn't a 4.0, unless you're applying to like a pre-med program or something where that's expected of you. But for the majority of people who are applying to college, so long as your GPA is between a 2 and a 3.5, you're probably going to be fine. Your GPA and other factors in your application are going to come together to tell the admissions office whether or not you're a good student. So don't freak out if your GPA isn't super high. Don't slack off, but don't worry too much about it. The next part of college applications, at least in the era of Kim Possible 05 to 07, things that people looked at were test scores, which in the United States are the ACT and the SAT. Now, nowadays, a lot of universities are sort of phasing out using the SAT and ACT as a determinant of whether an applicant would be a successful college student. Because tests have shown, both at the undergraduate and graduate level, that universities, like the one I went to, had students who were receiving all these crazy awards, and when a faculty member offhandedly made a comment about, see, this is why we have the GRE, this is why we have the SAT, the award recipient actually informed them that they did really poorly on the standardized tests, but were a fantastic student. They're just not a good test taker for the standardized tests. So, much like GPA, the SAT and ACT nowadays typically only stand out on an application if they're very high or very low. If you're somewhere in the average to above average range, it doesn't really work against you when filling out an application. And this is something that we would expect Kim to do. She's smart, but she's not a genius, so she would probably do in the above average range, as we would expect her to be something like a C+ to a B type student. So once again, her GPA and test scores are not going to make her stand out as an outstanding applicant, since she's not a genius like, say, her brothers or her parents. Alright guys, so here's where the nitty-gritty of a college application for someone like Kim Possible is really going to make or break a student. Now, as I mentioned, I worked for a specific Aunt Becky type university, and these things can be generally applied across the board, but always check with your institution and contact the admissions office to see what sort of things stand out to them. Better yet, if you know what major you want to apply to, contact their department office, because those are typically the people who actually look at your applications. The admissions office generally only covers undecided applications, so if you apply to a specific major, odds are your application is going directly to that department, so contacting the department faculty and staff is going to give you a better idea of what it is they want from their students, and you can then cater your application to what they want. Now, for my university, and a general across-the-board thing, is that what most universities care about is your personal statement and your letters of recommendation. Now, as I mentioned, Kim Possible, being a... Oh, hang on. Noisy neighbors. So, Kim Possible, saving the world and being a cheerleader and doing things like that, like we mentioned in the beginning, she's got contacts all over the world who do her favors to get her from location to location when she needs to go on a mission. So, getting letters of recommendation from her, community service or extracurricular activities on that end wouldn't be difficult, but getting a letter of recommendation that would really stand out in a college application from someone like, say, her substitute teacher, Mr. Barkin, would be much more difficult, because Kim skips school a lot. We constantly see her running out of the hallway to go on a mission. And while saving the world is a good thing, college universities want their kids in class. So if Kim gets letters from her teachers that say she's very nice and she was a good cheerleader, but she was never in class, that's really going to stand out on their application as a red flag. And moving on to her, extracurricular activities of saving the world, that's not really going to help her either, because like I said, she was never in class, and if you go back and watch the show, you see that a lot of Kim's capers, or saving the world missions, end up with a lot of collateral damage. Buildings are destroyed, goons are hurt, and there's a lot of damage that, presumably the city would then have to clean up. And nobody ever really holds Kim responsible, but we do see that this gets old. In both things like Disney Pixar's The Incredibles and Avengers Civil War, we see that eventually society gets tired of cleaning up after crime fighters. So, we can presume that Kim would eventually encounter this issue as well, and it would be something that universities would not want being traced back to them. Because one thing universities do is when you get an exceptional or famous applicant like Kim Possible, or at my school we had a lot of celebrity students, whatever they do when they're a student, suddenly their name is tied to your university for everything that they do, whether it's sponsored by the university or otherwise. So when Kim Possible's application comes across the table, they're going to Google her, and they're going to see all of the amazing things that she does, but they're also going to see all the amazing messes that she leaves behind for them to clean up. And they're going to want to put as much distance between her and their university as humanly possible, which, it sucks, it's not fair, but it's life. And it's life for Disney. As I mentioned, this is a problem that The Incredibles had to face. So it's not unreasonable to think that this problem wouldn't exist in this Disney universe as well. And in addition to being tied to all of the, abstract collateral damage, we also see several times throughout the series that Kim Possible had a lot of real-world danger for a Disney cartoon. Kim's life was often in danger, and a lot of the times Ron, her family, and her classmates would get dragged into mortal peril as well, simply because they were in the vicinity or because they have a personal tie to Kim Possible. And I'm sure this would be something that someone like Dr. Barkin would mention had he written a letter for Kim, was that, oh yeah, there was that one time that we were going to a cheerleading competition and then somebody from summer camp 10 years ago kidnapped our entire crew and she needed to come save us because of a personal vendetta she had. So that's going to be a big no-no for a lot of schools. Not only do they not want to be tied to any negative press that she might encounter in an Incredibles/Civil War type situation, but they could potentially be putting other students and faculty at risk, and they don't want to carry that liability. And I'm sure that all of these admissions counselors and academic departments that are sending these rejection letters to the one, the only Kim Possible are going to feel awful doing about it, but not awful enough to risk their jobs and potentially their lives by letting Kim into the university. And that brings me back to Kim's parents. I know that normal rules don't apply in households with gifted children or with genius parents, but we're gonna put a pin in her parents knowingly letting her get into mortal danger on a weekly basis. We're gonna circle back to that possibly in another video because I don't have time to open that Pandora's box. But just as normal parents, if this were a normal hobby or something that she wanted to do, they should have been helping her prepare for life after high school, and they just didn't. Like, they clearly approved of her being a crime fighter, and they should have helped her become a professional crime fighter if that was something that she wanted to do. There were ways that they could have supported her doing that. Like, why not help her get work with Global Justice and Dr. Betty? Because those were pseudo-government organizations, presumably the people that they hired and that Kim worked with when she encountered them throughout the series, that those people were paid. Kim was never paid for her crime-fighting work. Like, that's part of what makes her a do-gooder and a role model or whatever, because she's doing good, because she wants to do good. But let's not forget that back in the beginning of the series, she started KimPossible.com as a way to get odd jobs. And it just so happened that all of the jobs that piqued her interest were not paid. So she's been doing all of this saving the world for free. She has no paid work experience, but for when she had to get a part-time job in addition to being a high school student, being a cheerleader, Being a crime fighter by night, and sometimes during the day skipping school, she then had a part-time job at Bueno Nacho, who makes the nacho, which was briefly served on the menu at Taco Bell. Fun fact. So her resume now shows that she's an average to above average student with an average to above average test scores, a whole bunch of red flags for potential PR and liability nightmares as her extracurricular activities, and a brief part-time gig at a local taco stand. So far, not looking good for her. And in addition to that, she doesn't have any work experience beyond Bueno Nacho, so she's not going to be able to enter the workforce right away, at least not at a job that would pay at the level that she's used to living at. And her parents, being incredibly smart, stereotypical genius type jobs, would have had to have known, at least on some level, that Kim getting into college would have been difficult with the resume that she was building, and they did nothing. As I mentioned, they treated her with this sort of same genius level, laissez-faire, you'll figure it out, give them freedom to grow approach that is very common in gifted households, and it works well for her brothers because they nifty little gadgets and do it at a very high intelligence level, and Kim's able to figure out to do what she likes on her own and does it very well. She travels all over the world, she fights these supervillains, she has Wade create all these cool gadgets for her, but at no point did they step in and say, okay, this is cool, I'm glad that you're very dedicated and you clearly have the skills to do what you want at an elite level, but what's next? And it's also why you have freshman seminar classes and orientation at school, because it's a big transition and there's a lot of things that you need to do to prepare yourself for success. And Kim's parents really failed her here. I mean, there are multiple episodes in which Kim is having either an emotional struggle with her relationship with Ron, or with balancing her crime fighting and her cheerleading, or her crime fighting and school, and she actually reaches out to her parents and asks them for help. And at every turn, they just kind of do this shrug it off with, oh, well, you're Kim Possible, you can do it. Anything's possible for a possible. And then just kind of up and leave her to her own devices. Or they give some weird, unhelpful, unrelated anecdote about that one time they were in college and they made a robot army that destroyed their lab. Like, just zero parenting skills there. They didn't plan for what's next, and even Kim, even if she were a genius, which, as we've established, she isn't, teenagers are typically incapable of thinking long-term because their brains aren't fully developed yet. They're focused on the here and now, on getting to graduation, and then kind of figuring out life as it goes on from there. Which is why we have things like school counselors and parents and AVID programs and college preparedness, because we know that when you graduate, a lot of times knowing what to do next is difficult or not often as fully planned out as maybe they would have liked. Arguably, Mr. Barkin is the only one who's looking out for Kim throughout the whole series. He's portrayed as kind of this, not a villain, but as an antagonist to Kim's goals. He's always pushing for her to be in school, trying to make her held accountable for doing things like skipping class and missing tests by giving her detention that one time. He's constantly trying to make her see, for him, it was important that Kim be in school, because he knew, what presumably all the adults knew, that the world got saved before Kim existed, and it'll get saved after she's existed. She's important, and she's really good at what she does, but it can be done without her, and that while saving the world was important, it was just as important to focus on planning her life for after high school, which meant being in class regularly, doing well, following through with her other responsibilities. He was the only person who kept trying to veer her back onto a normal person's life track. And while the whole point of the show was that Kim didn't live a normal life, she still wanted to. She wanted to be a normal girl who just also happens to save the world. And the further into the series we got, the less she lived a normal girl's life, and the more she became just a crime fighter who occasionally had awkward school happenstances, like being unable to talk to cute boys or having to go to prom and things like that. Now, I'm not advocating that high school needs to be the be-all end-all of teenage priorities, but it does need to be a priority, because while it sucks, it's something that you've got to do to have a foundation for a successful life. Now, of course, there are always the exceptions to the rule, but most people, including Kim Possible in this instance, are not the exception. Her exception actually makes it more critical that she needs to have this basic foundation in order to move on and be successful. Otherwise, she's going to be living at home and fighting crime until she finds a job that's going to work for her, because she doesn't have any paid work experience. She doesn't have a great college application. And that's something that kind of sucks in Kim Possible's world, is that her world became accustomed to her saving it for free. And those are skills that she developed working for free and being really good at saving the world, when she could have had people like her parents or some sort of school counselor, if she'd ever gone to class or paid attention or gave any importance to her high school duties. Somebody could have told her that she needs to start working on networking with things like Global Justice and Dr. Betty or other organizations, so that way she could do what she liked and also be paid for it and be prepared for adjusting to cheerleader who saves the world to college student who saves the world, or nonprofit worker who saves the world, or, literally anything else. Because at this point, I'm really glad the show ended at high school graduation, because looking at her options the way that we've just examined it, she might have preferred to be the alien trophy at the end of the series rather than where she is now. Because, transitioning from high school student to adulthood, either going a career path or taking a year off or going to university or just trying to figure out what it is you want to do, is stressful enough when you do everything right. So Kim pretty much took every step possible to make this as difficult a transition in life for her as humanly possible. And I mean, hey, anything's possible for a possible, but I'm sure she would have appreciated, in retrospect, maybe having a little bit of an easier time. Okay, my lovelies, that's all I've got for KP today. Check out my other cartoon conspiracies here. And be sure to hit like and subscribe, especially if you enjoyed today's video. It really helps my channel grow and reach new lovelies, which, in these trying times of being stuck at home, YouTube videos are a great balm for the soul. And speaking of helping my channel grow, there is still a little bit of time left to enter the Geek Suite giveaway. I'll link the video here that has the instructions on how to enter our giveaway to win our box set of Rick and Morty vs. Dungeons & Dragons. So be sure to go ahead and check that out and enter. I will be listing the winner at the end of the month in an upcoming video. Alrighty, my lovelies. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all next time.